And I think the newscaster did have a good point when he was talking about people that don't have access to anything. What's their choice if it's labeled or not? I think the priority for me is within this testing phase. Because if you don't test it, and if governments don't test it, and third parties don't test it, then we don't know what the food is and who's producing it, what's producing it. So it doesn't matter if you're feeding kids in Rwanda or kids in New York. You're killing kids. If you're killing kids, you're killing kids. And if the person that's benefiting from it is the one that's testing it, it's probably not going to come out. What do you guys think?
I guess my question is, So I guess my question is, in regards to this video, is if she wasn't thinking on like a youth level, right? So you said that she was come after almost semi-aggressively. Do you all feel that, if she was older and she was making these comments, she would have been come at the same level? Or is it because she's so young that the host just feels that he can just like say whatever he wants for whatever reason and that she's not going to necessarily come back?
So I feel like that was the.
You interrupted me, rudeness. I've been meaning to say that all show. No, but so I've seen the show prior to when they have interviewed adults, and I think that they're as aggressive every time. But for me, it was almost condescending in his tone, in the reporter's tone, and how they addressed her, assuming that one, she didn't know what she was talking about, and two, that because she was young, her mind is going to change over time. And that doesn't always happen.
Right.
I feel like that was his intention, Kevin O'Leary. That was Kevin O'Leary's intention, because she is this activist that travels all around the conferences across the nation and across the world talking about GMOs and Monsanto. And there was a public event where she called Kevin O'Leary out, and she said, "Okay, Kevin O'Leary is coming for me." Well, then she sent for him, and Kevin O'Leary invited her to the show. So they had this debate, and that's what it was. I felt like it was like Kevin O'Leary's intention was to slay this 14-year-old GMO wannabe activist that is a puppet for the Right to Know campaign and anti-GMO campaign. That's what I was saying. I'm assuming. I'm not calling her a puppet or in any way, shape, or form. But that was what he was assuming. It was like, well, aren't you like a lobbyist? But it was no. This 14-year-old girl that's passionate about this, and she's traveling to educate people. And I felt like he was really aggressive. And even when he said, even when he compared her to his daughter that used to be anti-GMO and now she's changed her mind, because that's what young people, that's what we are. We are naive and we change our minds once we get a little bit of education. And it was just like, no, but like clearly you can see in her points that she knew exactly what GMOs were, why they were, the pros and cons of them, and she made a viewpoint from that. So what's up, Kevin O'Leary?
Right.
Yeah, I think she gave it to him. He called for her. She answered. And she delivered on it. To Marvin's point, I think, yes, the testing is important, but I do understand what she's saying is that if the only people that are doing the testing are the corporations, it doesn't matter how much testing that they do. What matters is that even if something is genetically modified, it needs to be labeled so that everyday people can make a conscious decision. And I think to some extent that was lost in the shuffle about labeling, but I do think more testing needs to be done. One point that Kevin Leary brought up in his interview is that he said that we're basically the test rats.
Test dummies, yeah.
Yeah, the test dummies, and I was like, that's pretty scary. We're assuming that these GMOs are working to provide more nutrients into foods for young people across the world, but when in all realities we don't know the long-term effects, both internally or to our crops, what this really does. And so I think she mentioned that. She could have went more into that, but I think you're right. More testing needs to be done, but from an outside person who doesn't benefit one way or the other. So a different agency.
Yeah, I think she did a good
and
job.
One of her main points was labeling. It was, and like she said it repeatedly. She said it like 3 times. Like, I just want companies. I just think that we have the right to know what's in our food, and that's what it's about. Like, it's not about her being pro-GMO or anti-GMO in foods. It's about people, us as consumers, having the choice to eat a GMO or not, and to know if it's in your food. Let's not even like get to the science of it and say that there's a lack of testing when there isn't. There isn't a lot of testing out there, but I should be able to know if there's GMOs in my food.
But I think O'Leary
and then let's take it further. Like, what do those GMOs? What are the effects of those GMOs?
But that's testing. Like, that's where testing comes from. So O'Leary had a good point, because I mean, kids in like rural Kenya, like here's my point, and I think this is what his point was, and he was a douche about it, and that's what made it come off wrong. I think that his point was that kids in Kenya need food, and it doesn't matter to them if it's labeled GMO or not. Where on the other end of it, this is the point that he just totally forgot to mention, was that kids in America or like kids in developed nations can choose between GMO food and non-GMO food. I think she drove a good argument in saying that we need to label. I personally feel that, yeah, you need labeling for everything, but on a corporate structure, I'd probably say you need testing first in like all these states, like all these places. And on the developed side, you definitely need to push labeling. So I think it's the consumer's responsibility, like people like Rachel, people like us, to lobby government to put regulations to say, hey, you got to label your food. Of course, I think corporations should do it, but I mean, like, let's just be honest, corporations aren't going to do something they don't have to do. So I think labeling is very important. The second part of it is the science behind it has to be there. Like, you just need testing, whether it's in Kenya or whether it's here. In Kenya, I wouldn't say you need labeling. You know, in rural communities, in India, I wouldn't say you need labeling.
Wait, just to like, I just want to clarify. So do impoverished communities, are they not given the choice of like intaking chemicals or not because they need food?
Well, I think what Marvin
I'll clarify for you.
Okay, because I think what you said is
like,
it goes to my point.
Because that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, it might sound like
because you're hungry. It doesn't matter if you're eating a GMO.
No, I don't think that's what he was trying to say. I think what he was trying to say is that they don't have any options to begin with. So regardless of whether or not it's GMOs or not GMOs, because they don't have that many options, the likelihood of them not eating it because of GMOs in it, regardless of how educated they are in it, may not be realistic. But I disagree. I disagree on this simple fact is that one thing that was brought up in the show is that he was like, well, what is this bowl of rice had enough nutrients or enough vitamin C or vitamin D in it to help a blind child. And one thing that she brought up is that one, that there's not enough testing to admit that that's true, and two, you would need 20 bowls. It wouldn't be one bowl that would cure it. And so I think there's so much before we can even get to the conversation of labeling until we know testing. We need, yeah, you're right, and that's what I agree with you on. Like, but the testing needs to not just be for 60, 90 days. It needs to be 3-4 years because we don't know the long-term effects. We could be killing people more than we're helping them.
And it's very possible. It's very possible. But the clarification on that is, you know, Kenya, there are probably parts of Kenya where they can choose to have an opinion on what they want to eat. And if you can have that opinion, that's fine. Then get the label. But if you're a community that doesn't have any other options, then I don't see labeling as your priority. I see testing. I think across the board, we need to emphasize testing, and then on a secondary level, where it can be, we need to label. And America is one of those places.
I get it.
Places, you have to.
I get the testing thing. This is my thing. So, one, I don't think that just using a country like Kenya, who also has like major cities, is the best idea.
I just said that Kenya has really developed places.
You also said if they. So let's just say underdeveloped communities.
Well, let's look at Nairobi, for instance, which is one of the largest farms in the world. So,
So I would also like to push back on the fact that think about who are the biggest like donors of food, for example, right? So you're saying if we're supposed to be pushing our governments to regulate something, why not regulate it internationally almost, right? So if the U.S. is giving food to a country, why not making it a responsibility? Just like we had to notice, I forgot the name of the study, but they did a study, and in countries where people don't eat rice and the U.S. was dropping rice, guess what was happening? The people still were not eating the rice because they didn't, one, in some places they didn't even understand what that grain was because the grain didn't necessarily exist, and two, it wasn't a part of the culture, right? So for us to sit here and say, you know, they're not going to eat it, like, I get it. Like, I've been homeless before. You know, I've been homeless in the U.S. before, and I get it. You know, you're going to eat what you have to eat to an extent. But to say that we shouldn't hold a country like ours who's giving food, or like the UK or developed countries who are usually the people giving food, responsible for giving GMO food that we don't know yet, yes, I think the testing should be pushed first. But I don't think that not labeling should even be brought up like this. Like, labeling should be a factor. If it's going to be a factor in the U.S., it should be a factor anywhere else that we're going to provide food in any sense of the word.
Or any American corporations that are selling food in other countries.
So
Right.
Monsanto is an international organization that's really involved in this. Would you want Monsanto to ask for labels on everything?
Yes.
Everywhere.
Yeah, there are companies in the European, like the European Union doesn't allow GMO, like they make GMO labeling. There are companies that like ban GMOs all across the world. There are different countries that like ban GMOs. So Monsanto is doing something over there. Like Monsanto isn't doing something over there that they're able to do in this country. So like we can do it. And the idea that like just because you need it, just because it's a necessity, just because you are poor, you shouldn't be like prone to the same expectations as everyone else. That's problematic, yo.
Right.
That's
I think the issue with it, and here's the issue. I think the way you guys are looking at it and the way I'm looking at it is different. I'm saying if you have this one phone, right? If you have this one phone, come on, progressives, don't get too progressive on me.
I'm just saying, it's not about being progressive.
Don't put me in the box.
It's about me being a female.
Right? So you got an iPhone, holding it like you're getting an iPhone to somebody. Like if this is the only phone I can give you, what I'm saying is, Dan, I understand your point. If I have just this one phone for you, what does it matter if it's labeled or not? Because at that point, it's just a tax. So if you test it, what I'm saying is not to give these people bad food. What I'm saying is test it and make sure you're giving people good things. And if that's the case, like if testing solves these issues, then there's no reason to label. Obviously, testing is right now, and you don't know what's going to happen like down the line. So that's why you need to label right now if you have the option. Now I'm with you. If we can get the government, if we can get corporations to get on board with it, to label all their products to go abroad, let's do it. But I think there's a lot of intricacies within that. And one of those intricacies is communities in Nairobi, communities like Dharavi, which is one of the largest, it was the largest slum until 2011. The reality is that it's not between like Uncle Ben's and another rice. It's just X rice.
Or is no rice at all.
Or no rice at all. So I mean, for me, labeling just doesn't seem like a priority.
Well, maybe we should ask them, because I think they would think, I would think that they may not, they may say that they may think that they're still going to eat it, but they would still want to be aware of information if it's going to be provided to anyone. Everyone should have equal access to information. And to say that because you're in another country and this is your only option, you shouldn't have access, I think that doesn't make sense.